My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and this is a special episode of Law Subscribed Live on LinkedIn. Steve Fretzin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Curtis. I appreciate you having me and appreciate you being here with me. So I am someone who kind of came up in sales, that dirty word sales, and I always had very difficult sales managers that just beat on me to go lock up business and fill that pipeline and whatever, and never kind of felt right about it. So when I set up, after years and years of experience in sales, set up my own sales coaching business, I decided that I was going to do things differently and I was going to establish a methodology of sales-free selling so that I could teach people how to do business development, sales, whatever we want to call it, without ever feeling icky, salesy, or in a way where they're not going to have the highest standards of professionalism. And so I set up a company at the time called Sales Results Inc., which is not something many people know, was the name of my company. And in 2000, it went gangbusters. People loved it. I helped a lot of people grow and even sell their businesses for millions. And when the recession of 2008-9 happened, that's when I started working with lawyers. Their hours were down, their GC job ended, whatever was the case. And they just loved that I had this sales-free methodology. And one lawyer turned into two, then five, then 10. And the next thing you know, it's 85% of my business about a year and a half later. So I pushed all my chips in. I said, look, I'm not a lawyer, but here's an industry in desperate need of training and coaching around how to grow business. It's not taught in law school, right, Kurbis? As you know, it's not something that the law firms, even the law firms that I talk to now that say they do training, they bring in a company for 6 weeks, or they do it internally with their BD and marketing people who don't have anywhere near the same level of content and creativity and things that I'm doing with my clients. So they don't, and not everybody that's there wants to be trained. They just want to get back to their desk. So this is how and why I've sort of come to be, is to help this beautiful industry of lawyers to be their best selves and versions. And I'm going to help the few that want to work with me directly, and the rest, I've got more content that I can possibly share in a lifetime out there for people that want to just take it in that way.
I was thinking about what we were going to chat about today, and I knew it was just the time was going to disappear. But even just to give a little bit more context, right? Like I recall being a law student, and I think you were given a talk for like the young lawyers section for the Chicago Bar Association. And I'm sure you did a lot of those. This is many years ago, right? This would have been between 2011 and 2014. And you were talking about how important it is to like build a book of business. And at the time I had a mindset of, well, I just need to know how to do the law well enough that I could get a job and I could worry about the building a book thing later.
Yeah.
How wrong I was. And so now whenever I go to speak to law students, because I know the law, unless they had a career prior to law, which I did not, I worked through college, in between college and law school, but not what I would call a career. But unless you're like law is not your first job, like main job, like this is something that needs to go, like it needs to be repeated and repeated and repeated. So I always say, hey, how many of you want to go into private practice? Let's see a show of hands. Congratulations, you're also in sales.
And then their faces change, right? Real fast.
100% they do. And I try to walk them back. I'm like, don't worry. Let me explain. Because at the end of the day, you could be the best lawyer, right? You could know the law like the back of your hand, which you don't need to with AI anymore. But you could know how to leverage the tech tools. You could know how to do all that. But if you can't get clients, it really, at the end of the day, kind of doesn't really matter. And at a certain point in your career in private practice, you're going to be expected to get clients. Typically, usually, there are some rare exceptions, but for the vast majority of folks, one of the reasons you could do what you do is building a book is like a super important thing. So, what's been your experience with, let alone law students, but like having to get that through to lawyers, the importance of building a book, and to the extent you can also speak to talking to students, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. At this stage, 2024, I don't know that there are too many lawyers that don't understand that having their own clients, whether they're a solo or they're in a private practice at a big firm, small firm, or in between, that having your own clients is advantageous, that you have control, you have freedom, you have autonomy, you have power, you have the ability to move laterally, you have all these options when you have clients. I think they know that. It's the switch that needs to be flipped between knowing it and doing something about it. That's like saying, look, I know I've got 50 pounds. I don't have 50 pounds, but let's say I had 50 pounds to lose. I know I have 50 pounds to lose. Everyone around me knows I have 50 pounds to lose. Losing the weight is tough, right? It means changing habits. It means sacrifice. It means discipline. It means a lot of things that people just don't want to deal with. And by the way, I'm really busy, or I've got a big, holiday season coming up. I know I'm not going to be able to be successful during that season. So it's very hard to lose weight. It's very very hard to do business development when you have the pressures of the billable hour, the pressures of the firm, the pressures of all the other hats that you may be wearing as a solo. And so when's the right time? Well, there's never a right time. I'm having a baby. I've got a big trial. You can list off all the reasons and things that are going on in your life where it's not the right time. So I'm dealing with a very small segment of the population that really wants to change and they know it's the right time. And those are the people I service directly. But my hope, Kerbis, is that people start to become a little bit of a student of the game, because even if it's not the right time now, the fact that they read a book, the fact that they listen to a podcast, that they watch videos, something that's going to help start to educate them on the importance of this and the things that are going to help them build a network might be the very basic level of it. Law students and young lawyers and even older lawyers, even GCs, listen, even general counsels need to polish up their networking skills, because how do you go from one GC role to a better GC role? Well, there's probably networking involved in that, So those are the kinds of things that I'm talking to people about. And it's going to be their internal motivation to want to learn and to implement that's going to make it happen. Otherwise, it's just passing them by.
Right. And I mean, what it really comes down to is like building relationships and maintaining those relationships, right? And how you go about doing that right now, and also just to put it out there, you talked about a lot of resources previously. Like hiring you right away might not be the right option for somebody right now. Like we're talking about mindset and getting into that mindset. And like I know you've been doing this for so long, like you need a lawyer in the right mindset, right? So you've got tons of resources. You're actually about to hit, at the time of recording anyway, of going live, 400 episodes on your podcast. And that's something too, that's about like being consistent with something, right? And I know that that's part of building relationships too. So talk to us about how you're able to, stay consistent and all these other resources that if I'm not ready to hire you right now, or I don't think I need a coach, I'm not in the right mindset. What resources do you have that a lawyer listening in can tap into these resources? Where do I even go?
Yeah, so there's people take in content differently, right? So I try to be very varied in the types of content I put out. So if you're someone that's in your car, you like to listen to something in the background when you're working, you're walking your dog, and podcasts are a no-brainer. Get into podcasts. It's not just mine, the Be That Lawyer podcast and yours, Kerbis, but there's podcasts of wonderful motivational speakers, general business guys like Alex Hormozy, and really cool people that just talk about the game of business and what you need to know to be successful and to scale and to grow and just get you in that right positive mindset. Obviously, books. I've written 4 books, so they're all on Amazon. The most recent one, Legal Business Development Isn't Rocket Science, is an international, again, in a small category like legal business development, but it's if you're going to buy a book in that category, that's the book to get. And so if you like to listen to audio or read or get an ebook, all of on your Kindle, that's all available. Videos, YouTube, I've got well over 500 videos on YouTube, and some of them are you can search them by category. I want to learn about networking. Well, here's a bunch of networking videos. I want to learn more about the sales free selling process. Well, then there's videos on that, or clips of the podcasts. If you prefer to take in podcasts in little bite-sized pieces, 5-minute, 3-minute, 5-minute segments, well, we have those. So, and then I do a ton of presentations all over the country. So one way or the other, if you realize at some point that business development, marketing, branding, time management are things that you're going to need to leverage in your career, start small and pick up a book. Start small, start listening to podcasts, start becoming a student of the game, as I mentioned a couple times. And then at some point when you've hit a wall, or when you realize, hey, you know what? I can read a book on golf and get better at golf, but that's not going to make me win the tour, right? That's when you want to call me. When you want to really take things to an entirely different level, get 100,000 to 500,000, 500 to 1 million. You want to develop and scale and grow. Let me be the person that's going to help you bring in consistent clients every year.
So that could be a mistake potentially, because we're talking about mistakes that lawyers make when they're building a book, right? So one of it is they hate selling. So we could talk about how you teach the sales free selling technique, where if you hate selling, you're probably just doing it the wrong way, right? So we'll talk about that, and then we'll also talk about how going it alone is a mistake. So let's talk about those.
Yeah. So sales, so lawyers that have been doing it a while, they say, hey, we're going on a pitch meeting. What does that mean? It means we have someone that's interested in our services. We're going to go to their office. We're going to travel or whatever, and we're going to pitch them our firm. We're going to pitch them our services. So pitch meeting in my mind is the equivalent of me going to a doctor and the doctor saying, what's wrong? And I say, my arm hurts. And he says, well, let's just cut that off. I'm going to give you a prescription, but I'm not going to diagnose, right? So when you go and do a pitch meeting and it's all about you and your firm and the services you provide, you're offering free consulting, you're talking rates, that's a very outdated model for business development. And by the way, that's when people either feel sold or the buyer takes advantage, takes you for every nickel they can of your time, free consulting, solving problems, everything. And then they don't respond or reply. And you're like, what happened to this great client? I did such a great job, or prospective client. They just ghost you. So what I'm teaching is I'm teaching a way to plan and execute in a way that's going to go after efficiency, low hanging fruit. How do I spend my time? And then when I finally do get a new opportunity, I'm going to spend more time building relationship, more time setting the game plan and the control element. I'm going to ask a lot more questions and really walk a buyer through a buying decision versus trying to sell someone to my firm or to use me. And so a lot more information is gathered, a lot more qualifying is gathered, which allows us to understand if this is real or not. And it sets up a win-win outcome versus a more adversarial, hey, I'm in it to sell legal services and you're to get free consulting. And we're just going to bang heads because we're both out for ourselves as opposed to out for the win of the group or the team. So that's kind of the gist of the sales free selling kind of model. It's just a more consultative way to run a meeting.
So then what are some other mistakes that you've seen over the years and that you're seeing now that lawyers are trying to do, and they just have no clue, what they're doing, and sort of how do you even avoid being in that situation in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with not having a plan. I mean, it's ready, fire, aim. And so there's in the other term that I hear regularly, and you know this too, Kerbis, is random acts of marketing. So today I'm going to go to this event, then I'm going to do this post in LinkedIn, and then I'm going to record this podcast, and then and it's just you're everywhere doing everything, and none of it's working cohesively. So the idea that I would sit down, I would identify where someone's strengths are, where their weaknesses are, where their low-hanging fruit is, who their targets are, what's your buyer persona? Meaning, are you dealing with wealthy CEOs? Or are you dealing with, low income injured people? Like who are you targeting? What are the best means to get to those people? Who are the best connectors to those people? Most people don't even think twice about their targets in the form of connectors. I'll give you a quick example. If I'm an estate planning attorney and I'm networking with everyone anywhere for any reason, maybe not the best use of my time. But what if I spent my time with financial planners? What if I spent my time with divorce attorneys? What if I spent my time with accountants, people that are the first to hear that, hey, someone really needs a plan. Like they need to get this. They've got a lot of assets. They've got a lot at stake, and they don't have a way of distributing if they die or just to make sure that it's tax deferred or whatever it might be that they need a plan for. So I can go meet with everybody, or I can meet with the people who actually can hand me the work on a regular basis. Which would you prefer? One's going to take very little time and a lot of return on investment. One's going to take a lot of time and very little return on investment. But the problem is lawyers are doing the one where they're just going out and meeting everybody. And in many cases, they're just not getting a good return for that investment of energy and time and effort.
Right. And, something that comes to mind for me is if if an attorney is going to work with you to help define that client persona, I've also heard, client avatar, then what you could do is you could better identify who are those good referral partners, right? So like if you're an estate planning attorney targeting a particular kind of a market, then you can go and network with those CPAs, those financial planners and advisors, right? And what's the thing you could do? Well, you could have a podcast where you're interviewing and highlighting those professionals, because what are they going to do? They're going to turn around and use it and share that with their clients who could be your clients too, right? And so I will just throw it out there. I just did for Lawline. It's live now on Lawline site, a podcasting for lawyers presentation. That's a version of what I did at ABA Tech Show. Now that's more of a do-it-yourself kind of approach because that's how I do it. I do it myself. Fretzin, you outsource that, right? And so like another mistake I think folks make is they do try to do everything themselves, right? And whether that's outsourcing the coaching to get another opinion to you, whether it's with podcasting or marketing or all these other things, like how are you outsourcing? How are you working with your clients on helping them get out of the mindset of I need to do everything myself?
Yeah, I mean, it's so critical. So once you have a plan and know what your direction is and how you're going to spend your time, there's another thing you can do, which is to track yourself, track your day, track your week. Just similar, you're tracking your hours, billable hours, track how you're actually spending your time. And what you might identify is that there's a tremendous amount of time, 2, 3, 4 hours a day that's being, you're being handcuffed in email jail, or you're focused on editing your podcast, or you're focused on posting on LinkedIn and doing things that are just incredibly time intensive. And that's where lawyers need to realize, hey, there's never been a better time to become autonomous by getting virtual assistants. You and I were talking about our friend Brett Tremblay at Get Staffed Up. Yes, I have a full-time assistant that does all my marketing. So I create the content, right? Like this. Okay, so you and I are doing this. How is this podcast interview getting out? Is that my time or is that my assistant's assistant's time. Well, that's my assistant's time. Okay. My time is here doing this with you. Everything that gets edited, chopped up, or repurposed and put out, that's all going to be my assistant. So once you realize where your low hanging fruit is, where you should be spending your time, how you can get to your targets through a podcast, through a book, through an article, through social media, whatever it might be, then you need to realize, hey, am I the best person for this? Or is this something that I should hire an agency for, a VA for? There's a lot of part-time assistants and VAs now out of India, out of South America, out of Asia that can do it for you. And you just have to make sure you get a referral so you find the right company for that. Love the fact that you and I both have tremendous resources of people that we've met that we know are good at what they do. And so when a lawyer needs assistance, like a virtual assistant, or they need a marketing agency or whatever, like they can come to us and skip through that vetting process of getting taken for a ride by people who just want a $10,000 a month, SEO thing when that's not what they should be doing, that kind of stuff.
Right. And this also, I think, goes back to mindset and having the right mindset, right? Like if you think about any attorney, whatever you're doing, I mean, in particular, private practice, but especially private practice, what you're trying to tell your clients, what it comes down to at the end of the day is, sure, you could represent yourself pro se. You could go to one of these websites and download documents and kind of get part of the way there some of the time, until something goes wrong, or you don't understand what this word means, right? But what you're basically asking them to do is to outsource them doing it themselves to you're their outsourced legal, right? So if you understand that that's one of the ways that you could try to convey and sell your services to a client, then you have to, going back to, I forget which philosopher it was, maybe it was Plato or Socrates, one of the ones where it's like, I think it was Socrates, to know the good is to do the good, right? Like when you understand that, you cannot do anything but also do that yourself as a lawyer, right? So now what are you doing, chopping things up and editing things or scheduling calls and doing all that stuff? Like that's not where you could have the most value for your business. Or if you want to be one of those lawyers on the beach, I know there's like a growing movement for automation and that, right? Like if you're doing that, then you can't get out of there. Now I outsource a lot to automation and technology, and I'm only a little more than 2 years into my practice, but I already have a game plan for when that technology can only take me so far and I need to start outsourcing to human beings as well, right? And so that's one of those things where it's just about, even if you're not outsourcing yet, getting in the mindset of not just doing everything yourselves. We're lawyers. We're very smart. I feel so bad for you, Fretzin, having to work with such smart people all the time because I know we can be difficult. But, so we can figure out how to do a lot of these things, but it doesn't mean that we should. Something else, I mean, if you have any comments on that, otherwise,
I want to add, part of being smart is knowing where your time is best spent. And if you're doing your bookkeeping, if you're doing your own your collections, if you're doing, I mean, we could list off 100 things and you're doing 10 of them and it's eating away your billable hour. It's eating up your ability to go get business or handle the business you have. Those are the biggest challenges that lawyers need to realize. You got to outsource to AI. You got to outsource to other people. You got to let go. Be smart enough to let go and don't let go easily. I mean, and from a standpoint of like trusting everybody, I mean, you got to make good decisions about who you trust and how you get them into your accounts and things like that. But to not do it is you're setting yourself up for failure.
So there's a lot of ways that attorneys, anyone, frankly, who's in a sales role can get clients, right? I mean, business development is one thing. Marketing is another thing. Advertising is another thing. And I'm sure there's more. Those are the big three that come to mind for me. And another mistake I think lawyers make, and just folks in general who are trying to be in sales, is they conflate these things. In particular, entrepreneurs and small business owners, which a lot of firm owners like myself are, right? So, maybe share a little bit about like the overlaps and the differences between these three things: business development, marketing, and advertising.
Yeah. So business development is going to be, I see it as more of your personal effort. You're getting in front of someone for coffee to network. You're getting in front of someone to see if they're interested in your services as a potential client. It's more one-to-one. Marketing is going to be more one-to-many. And that's going to be, your website. That's going to be, all the different channels that you have that, your outreach. So I have 15,000 people in my LinkedIn. I'm posting something that's valuable to them. It's a video, it's an article, it's whatever. That's marketing, right? What's the point of marketing? The point of marketing is to bring them in to the sales funnel where you can actually do business development. All right. So one is, and they're working together. Like I see marketing and sales, marketing, business development, two sides of a mountain. You got to climb both sides. You got to climb the business development side, climb the marketing side. Most don't do that. Most just climb one or the other. And I think that's sometimes a misstep. And then advertising is like you have a budget, you have a serious budget, and you can just put it into a billboard, put it into TV, put it into things where you know there's a return on investment because other people are doing it. Plus, you can track a lot of things with marketing and advertising and business development. It's all trackable. So you can understand, is my money going, I put in $1 million, am I getting 2 million back? If I am, that's a good investment. If I'm paying $1 million, I'm getting $500,000 back, and maybe you want to do something else. That's probably not a good way to go. So there's a saying in marketing, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. That goes across the board for all three. But my jam is business development. I believe that if you go out and build relationships and you develop targets and achieve those targets, and you can do some marketing while that's going on, that's kind of the direction I'm taking most of my clients, because some of them have a firm that does the marketing and the advertising. They don't need to focus on that, or they want to spend a lot of money on advertising and marketing. I'm like, you don't need to spend that money. Let's put your effort and time into it and go get the business, because you have all these relationships that you're not even leveraging. The story I tell pretty regularly is when I meet with someone, you don't realize how much experience I have in this, but it's like I'm able to dissect their practice, what they're doing, not doing, strengths, weaknesses, and everything. In most cases, I find that they're doing so many things ineffectively that it's like there's a table in front of them loaded with millions of dollars, and they're just walking around it all day. And so my job is to say, hey, you may not realize this. You've got blinders on. You're not seeing all this money that I'm seeing. Let's work together to go get that money and go get that and enjoy. Because when you have money, it doesn't buy you happiness, but it sure does buy you a lot of relief, knowing that you have 100,000 in the bank versus 50 in debt, right? There's a lot of pressure that you have or don't have based on the amount of money that you can generate. And then of course, money means different things to different people. So, for me, it's not about the fancy boat I want to buy. It's how much money can I put away in my kid's 529, right? It's how much money can I save for my retirement so my wife and I can travel more, but ultimately it's about control. So,
taking your table analogy, there's a table with a bunch of money on it and you're walking around it. I would actually put 2 tables there. And one is you're walking around a table of money from people who aren't your clients yet, and you're walking around a table of money of people who are your clients, right? And frankly, I think in particular, like when you're a part of the subscription economy, if you're a lawyer like me and you completely ditch the billable hour, you're thinking of things totally differently. And one of the things you learn when you study the subscription economy is it's always easier to sell an existing subscriber or an existing client than it is to get a new client, right? Your customer acquisition cost is going to be higher than upselling existing clients. And you want to provide real value for that upsell, right? You can't just be like a sleazy sales thing. But we find in the subscription economy that the amount of revenue that can be generated from existing clients far outweighs, in certain instances, in particular, I think in the services industry, upselling existing clients. So at least when I'm picturing that, you paint a really good picture of walking around a table, Fretzin. When I'm picturing those 2 tables, the one with the existing clients has a larger pile of money on it. What do you think?
Yeah, you can do 1 or 2 tables. I generally put them into 1 table, but like I'm dealing with mid-market lawyers who are at full service firms and they're not cross marketing. Like they're missing so much revenue, and they all know this too. They all know, oh, I can bring something in for $500,000. I can hand it off to someone, keep the relationship, and get paid on that $500,000. I'm not doing that work. Like, are you kidding me? In what world do you get that kind of side hustle? And they're not using it or leveraging it because they don't know how. It takes effort and work and time and whatever. Okay, but like, give me a break. Like, there's no easier way to make money than through cross marketing and upselling cross-sell clients, and getting introductions from clients who think you're great. They want to tell other people about you. They just don't know how. You haven't asked. And there's all this money that's just, so you can go out and network and be a professional meter and go out and scramble and meet strangers all day, or you can focus on the low hanging fruit that's right in front of you. Right. And that's a lot of where I spend my time with clients, is helping them to go in and focus on that internal, circle that they have, that they've developed and haven't leveraged.
When I went solo, I pivoted from mostly litigation to a transactional only practice. I did not have a database of documents to automate. That's why a business and employment legal document database and automation tool like 650 is super useful. I can rely on the quality of the documents in 650's database, since they're putting excellent legal minds to work curating and updating their documents and automations over time. When you're not billing by the hour, outsourcing and efficiency matters, and 650 can help you scale your practice to get high-quality documents drafted in less time. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at 650.com, and when being onboarded, to get 10% off. If you're not a business and employment attorney, or you have your own documents that you'd prefer to use, then my next sponsor, Gavel, is the automation tool for you. Gavel allows you to build shareable, client-facing workflow and document automations. In other words, Gavel helps you create a legal practice where attorneys can monetize the value they bring clients in productized form and scale via subscriptions and flat fees. Use the code LAWSubscribed at gavel.io to get 10% off an annual subscription. There's no one right way to automate and scale your practice, but with one or both of my sponsors, 650 and Gavel, you can take your subscription law firm to the next level. Links to both in the show notes. Now back to the show. Something else that comes to mind on this is what you were talking about with the tracking the marketing and advertising, right? So like if you're, in particular, if you're outsourcing to third parties to help you with marketing and advertising, they're going to track for you. I mean, you know, they're incentivized to show you the data. Right. If you hire a good, if you outsource well, they're going to track, because also if the numbers show you're getting a good ROI, you're going to stay with them, you're going to increase your spend, et cetera, right? I'm sure you could track these things yourself as well. So when it comes to business development, you know, CRM comes to mind, a client relationship manager, right? So like, are you working with attorneys on that? Like they come to you, they've got a million business cards. They don't know when the last time they reached out to somebody is, even if they're writing it down on paper, which is better than nothing. You know, maybe they don't date it. They got to collect all the pieces of paper, right? So like, cause that's another mistake lawyers make is, yes, they agree with everything you're saying, but like actually tracking the stuff. When did you last reach out to them? When is their kid's birthday? Do their kids do theater? You know, maybe get them tickets to a local theater thing, right? Like we can't, lawyers are smart again, but we can't keep all of this in our heads and all the laws and apply and all the facts of our cases. So like, how do we track and manage the business development side of things?
So in a perfect world, I would have everybody, you know, with Clio Grow or with Lawmatics or with you know, CRMs to track their pipeline, all their contacts that you know, when they pull up a name of someone, you know, all the emails are attached, everything's connected. It's like that's the promised land. The reality that I'm in are that most of the lawyers don't want another software. They're already out like software like to death. So I mean, I've created an activities journal where we track their people, we track their numbers, we track their activity, we track how those meetings went, what happened in the meeting, is there a next step or not? Because part of it is knowing that there's there's enough activity that's going to drive up the business. The other piece of it is, how is that activity paying out as it relates to conversion? So if you meet with 10 people that you think could be good clients for you and you close 2, and there's 8 that said no, or, you know, or I'll think about it or whatever, gave you some line, and if we can figure out what's going wrong in those meetings and get it up to 8 out of 10, well, the difference between 2 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 6, each deal is worth X. And you could see how that's going to exponentially, you know, grow the business just by tracking activity levels and conversions. So I have a format that I use for that. By the way, the accountability of having a coach where you're not just left on your own, you actually have like a partner there with you, making sure that every week your numbers are where they're supposed to be. And if not, why not? And how are we going to get back on track? And, you know, just having that partner in your corner, it's like the difference between Michael Jordan being on his own or Michael Jordan and having Phil Jackson. You're going to win a lot more championships with Phil, right? Even though Michael's the best, right? The GOAT. Great. Better with Phil. No one can argue that.
So for those who are listening on the republished podcast version of this, go ahead and subscribe at lawsubscribe.com. You'll get the videos emailed to you in your inbox, or you could go on LinkedIn, which is where we stream this live. You'll see Fretzin's got a Michael Jordan jersey framed in his background. So that's, you know, it comes as no surprise to us watching right now that there's a Jordan reference in this. But you're absolutely right. Even not the star athlete, even just like if you want to get in shape, if you're paying a trainer and you pay them whether or not you show up to your training session, first of all, sunk cost fallacy, you're probably going to show up. You know, you're more likely to show up because you've paid the money, and you're more likely to get the benefit of the training because you've paid the money. And so it ends up becoming a win-win, a virtuous cycle kind of a thing, right? In the same way I find as you know, the subscription attorney, leveraging the subscription model, when the clients pay me at the start of every month, they're more likely to use my legal services, which increases the likelihood that they stay subscribed as I provide them with legal services, right? And so there's value to outsourcing, period. Whatever it is, training, coaching, legal services, bookkeeping, whatever it is, right? Because you're going to take advantage of it. You're going to want to reap those benefits of what you're paying for.
Well, figure anything that you need to figure out on your own. I want to become a professional soccer player. Okay, so I got to go figure that out on my own. Where do I start? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? Like, there's like 1,000 answers I need to find, and then I got to actually do it. And in legal and growing a law practice, there's the same thing. You just do it on your own, or you engage people that can help cut through the BS and get to what actually needs to happen. That could be me, that could be other coaches, that could be, you know, just how do you get better at using a tool like LinkedIn, right? Like I just need to become, so you got to figure it out on your own by pulling it up or you got to watch some youth. Like I'm not a handy guy, Curvis, okay? But I'm smoking meat, I'm changing, you know, faucets, I'm doing things around the home because there's all this great content that didn't exist 10, 20 years ago that's now teaching me things that I can learn to save me time and money and energy. And those all exist. And if I really wanted to become a great plumber. Well, guess what? I have to go work for a plumber and be an apprentice and go to school and go all through that. But this is what we have to do to be our best versions these days is we need to take action on stuff that's important to us.
Right, kind of like you were talking about the ROI on advertising, or if you spend $1 million and you make $2 million, you've got a good, you're getting a good ROI. Well, it's sort of a similar. It's hard to measure that with certain things like legal, which oftentimes is seen as a cost center and not a profit center. Whenever I'm working with a client, I try to reframe how I'm actually a profit center, because instead of watching the YouTube videos on lawyers talking about things on YouTube, you could be making more money in your business or closing more deals or doing things, right? So I try to show how outsourcing to legal is actually a profit center. With the personal trainer situation, maybe you're feeling better, you're feeling physically better, right? That's how you measure that ROI. And with you, if somebody works with you and they're bringing in more business and they build their book from, 100,000 to 500,000, kind of no-brainer ROI, right? So when you're looking at the numbers of things in particular, it's sort of easier to measure that ROI. But another mistake lawyers make is they think there's a silver bullet solution or it's going to start working right away. So like, what is the kind of time horizon that you give to your clients about, hey, this isn't going to start, tomorrow. Like, this takes time, right? So like, what have you seen as the
Yes.
typical time horizon?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, if somebody's starting a new practice from nothing, I'm going to set the expectations that it's going to take some months and we got to put in the time. And, is it possible something might pop in the second meeting you have? Yeah, it's possible. On the other hand, again, remember that pile of money I found on the table? There are some people that it's like, hey, you have 20 clients that think you're the best thing since sliced bread. You haven't got in front of them in a year or two. You're just going to go out and just start meeting with them. And every time you come back from meeting with them, you're going to get a new matter. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, just go in. I'm going to give you a bunch of questions to ask. You're going to rehash the relationship and you're going to ask a ton of questions. You're going to walk out of there. They're like, what? So there are opportunities to get business quickly if you've already built the network, if you already have your own clients. I had one guy, he was spending all of his time networking everywhere, meeting strangers. And I said, John, I go, how many clients do you have? He goes, I don't know, 400 or 500. And he's in the AI space. And I go, how much time are you spending with them? He goes, well, when they call me and they need something, I spend time with them. I go, no. I go, you're no longer going to be doing all this stranger danger networking. Like, we need to get in front of, let's actually print out your list of clients. Let's rank them A, B, and C of dollars and value and potential for more business, and let's go out and meet them. And he's coming back with business all the time. So it really depends is the answer. But I think we should set expectations that if you have a plan and you have the ability to execute effectively and follow through and maintain, are you going to do better, like significantly better than doing none of that? Oh, I would think yes.
We're about 40 minutes in. So for those of you who are playing some kind of game about how long did it take for someone to say it depends on a legal podcast, it just happened. And it wasn't even the lawyer that said it. So you said something that I want to highlight. You said one of the things you do is you learn about your clients, existing clients or past clients, and you give them a bunch of questions to ask. And I think that's another common mistake lawyers make, right? Is we care more about talking than we care about listening. And by giving them questions to ask and you coaching them on how to do that, it almost forces the lawyer into the listening position when they're the ones asking the questions. So do you do any, what else have you seen with lawyers when they get that paradigm shift in order?
It's a dramatic change. And the talking is the killer, and this in the free consulting is the killer. So it's what you and I are buyers, right? Purpose, we go out and we buy stuff. Okay. And we're looking for price and information. So we're asking those questions to get that information and make a good decision. The problem is with legal services and with my services and your services is generally that we need to do more diagnosing and less prescribing. And most lawyers are just out solving and selling and prescribing when they should be sitting back and building relationships and asking and listening and building trust and figuring out, is this a fit and are the problems matching up with what I do? So I have a whole system around that. I mentioned sales-free selling, but even more than that, it's breaking lawyers like dogs or horses or whatever gets broken because they're just talking too much. I mean, it's 90% of the meeting is them talking, and I've got to turn it around and say, hey, you should be talking maybe 10 to 20 and get the prospective client talking most of the time. So if you're not prepared with how you're going to approach that, what questions are you going to ask? How are you going to take them down a road that is going to lead to them coming to the conclusion that you're the lawyer they want to hire, and how do we move forward, versus you having to sell them on you and giving them all this free advice that they can then take home, they can give to their existing lawyer, they can shop you. There's all kinds of options at that point. So we want them bought into us, and that seems seems the best way to do that is by us being good listeners and demonstrating empathy and talking less.
Yeah, and it's also how we're talking and what we're doing, right? Like when you say like free consulting, right? Like we the commensurate problem solvers. We want to start problem solving right away, and that's not always going to be the best thing. I talked to a potential client even just a couple of months ago, and he had shopped around for a lot of lawyers for a potential claim that he thought was worth a lot of money. Well, I took more of a I'm going to educate this potential client type approach, where I'm not actually giving legal advice or free consulting or anything like that. I'm going to talk about, what are your damages even, and how can you even prove that? Like, let's talk about like the elements of negligence here and educate them about that, which by the way, for video watchers, I do have a brand new thing that I'm doing for where I'm doing education on legal topics. It's called the Law for Kids
Oh,
podcast.
yeah.
So throwing this out there now, it's live. I think the 5th episode went live today. There's 6 things published, including the trailer. And it's a weekly podcast where I do bite-sized educational topics about the law that a kid can understand. And realistically, like I could have given my what are damages bite-sized podcast episode and shared that with this client, and that client might have realized right away that maybe there isn't a claim that's worth pursuing. Because like, how the heck are you, like, do you have the receipts? And that's an important question to ask that not a lot of folks will ask, right? And then that saves you the lawyer time too. So getting back to my questions I had for you here is, as we start to wrap up, so by the way, I see we've got 5 people still live with us. If you have questions for Fretzin about business development, anything we've been talking about, now's your chance to put it in the chat so Fretzin can answer these live for you. So we're in the second part of the interview here, so we're going to start wrapping up in a few minutes. So now's the chance to get those questions in for something that I do a lot of mentorship with law students and young lawyers. And one of the things I tell them about is, well, first of all, the Be That Lawyer podcast, obviously, and not just because you've had me as a guest twice, and that was a long time ago now, but you learn some great things through the podcast. But something else that I've been recommending that they do that they can't get, it's never too late to start. Well, just like in business development in general, right? It's like, when's the best time to plant a tree? Yesterday, and if not yesterday, today, right? Get started. But what I've been suggesting, I'm curious to get your input on something like this, in particular for law students, I think, but it could be applicable to lawyers too. Start building an email list for a educational newsletter about something that you do, to tie it back into the conversation we just had about education, right? And this could be the kind of thing like with AI, where you can not just have AI draft the thing, that's not what you want to do, but you could leverage AI on prompting and editing to decrease the time it takes you to create this content and then batch it. So instead of having to like do it every week, like that Law for Kids podcast, I'm 10 episodes ahead at every point in time, and it's scheduled to go live on all the platforms, right? So you could batch these things to go out so you have a minimum, monthly publication type thing. Start building that newsletter, because when you're a law student, even if you don't go into private practice right away, if you're consistent with that newsletter, you have maybe even have it on your business card, subscribe to my newsletter. That's like a lower ask because you're not trying to sell them anything right there. You're just trying to say, hey, I have a newsletter about personal injury. I have a newsletter about maybe just toxic tort cases, and, subscribe to that, because I see like law firms have this subscribe to our newsletter on their website. It's highly underutilized. They almost never send a newsletter. And if they do, it's way too long and it's got a bunch of junk in it. So I feel like from a BD and relationship building kind of thing, like leveraging those tools, like newsletter tools, is just an underutilized thing. And what do you think about that? And are you seeing any success with any lawyers you're working with to that?
I mean, I think AI is still coming around. I think lawyers are, like most things, they're slow to adopt and adapt to it. So, I'm using ChatGPT primarily for coming up with fresh ideas for how to word an article or how to word a title of an event or things like that. I haven't gotten to fully embrace it yet, and maybe I'm waiting for more to come out of it. And again, I'm outsourcing to my assistants to update the newsletters that we get out twice a month. So I think the key thing is you got to find, there's new tools coming out all the time. One that just came up recently, I don't know if you know about Opus. I think you do, Kerbis, but you may mention that to me. But like, all right, so we're doing this great video together, and it's going to take, hours and hours to cut it up into video clips so that we can use it for social. Well, something like Opus will take it and they'll just, they'll find the three to five best clips of us talking and edit it for us. And it's done in seconds versus hours. So things like that are going to help as we continue to get more sophisticated with AI and leaning into things that are helping us save time.
So with that, as we start to wrap up here, I don't see any questions live. And speaking of, a tool I use that leverages AI is called Descript. It's a primary editing tool that I use for any sort of video, audio, marketing, podcast, anything streaming type thing. And what I'm going to do after this is done is Zoom is going to send me the cloud link to download this conversation. I'm going to download it, upload it into Descript, and it's going to transcribe the whole thing. I'm going to edit out all the ums and ahs with a click of a button. I'm going to edit out all the audio that's longer than 0.01 seconds because we were talking about a lawyer audience that doesn't need any of the extra fluff. And then there's a share link that I'm going to share with you that you're going to give to your VA that then they could download that video that's like, edited a lot, but not necessarily edited to the clip size. And then your VA could take that clip, could take that whole episode with all the ums and ahs already deleted and chop it up and use it on social media, right? And for me, that's a very easy lift. And while that uploads and transcribes in the background, I'm working on other things, right? And so I'm handling other stuff. So even though I am the one doing that, if I had a VA, they could be the ones who sign in, do that, and download it. And so that's the tool that I leverage for that. So then your VA could upload it into Opus, and Opus could just do it. Now, Descript does that too. You could prompt it to do it. OpenAI is they integrate with OpenAI. But I've found suggested clips from AI are still not quite there yet. Is in my experience, it's going to get there. And I haven't tried Opus yet. But yeah, there are these tools out there. But always vet them. It's just like if you're using AI, it's just like using another human. Are you going to give a task to another human and not vet the task that they did?
Well, most of them have free trials, so you can do a week of it where you can test it out and say, "Oh, this is the worst. Like this didn't help at all," or "This was, oh my God, this just is going to save me." And I think I was doing like 8 to 10 hours a week with my VA on video editing. 8 to 10 hours a week. Now that doesn't cost me a ton because the VA's reasonably priced. But if I can get that down to 1 to 2 hours a week, now I've got 8 hours, 6 hours of additional time. I can put them on something else.
Yeah. So we got a question for you as we start to wrap up here. If there's any more questions, now is the time to drop them in the chat. So, hi Steve, how do you get people invested in what you're selling when you have so much competition, and how do you define a differentiation factor for them to feel you're the best option for them?
Wow, that's a great question. Really nice. The answer, it depends. No, there's so much competition. However, not all competition is created equal. So what are we doing to set ourselves apart? What are we doing to compete through tools like LinkedIn and social media and content creation and putting things out there? You're either in the game or you're not in the game, right? You're either being, you're the car, you're being run over by the car. So I think number one is you have to have a plan for business development and marketing and how you're going to go about it to make sure that you're consistently the thought leader in that space. That's like number one. So if you're an estate planner and there's 100 around you, why should they come to you? And what's unique about you? And how are you continually creating content that's getting you in front of that audience of potential buyers? The differentiator is a little trickier in the sense that you need to come up with something that matters to your audience and something that you can actually execute on. So for example, I'll give a quick example. There's a firm in Chicago that recognized that responsiveness was the most important thing. So they came up with a 2-hour return call guarantee so that anyone that calls their firm will get a call within 2 hours to ensure that, but they plastered that everywhere on their website, on all their social media. And I think still use it to this day, 10 years later, because no one else is willing to say 2-hour, guarantee. So, and I'm not saying guarantees are always the right word or thing to do. My differentiator, just as an example, is I work only with individual lawyers and only on business development. So they want to scale their practice. I'm not the guy. They want a website. I'm not the guy. So I'm hyper targeted in who I'm dealing with. And then also I've got differentiators in how I'm doing it. I'm not just coaching. I'm also training. I'm put together a program that combines things that I know is effective and has worked for years. And I'm promoting that coaching alone isn't enough. You need to actually learn these skills, and we need to go back to school to do it. So you need to think about what you're great at, what you love doing, what makes, what you do better than anyone else, and how do we leverage that in the form of a differentiator. And there are a number of really good marketing people out there that can take what you're good at doing and what makes you unique, and they can, for $5,000 or whatever it is, help you really articulate that and put it out in front so that you can get the most traction possible.
And there's to the extent you could do in-person or virtual things where you get to say an elevator pitch, the more of those you do, the more you will improve your elevator pitch over time, whether or not you have a coach. But the time horizon to improve that pitch and differentiation is going to decrease if you work with somebody. I mean, that also makes you got so close to saying it with the thought leadership stuff, but you didn't say it. And that is if they know, like, and trust you. In particular, do you even need a differentiator if they know, like, and trust you, right? Because that is the biggest differentiator is there's 100 attorneys who do estate planning in the area, but I know Kerbis this, and I would rather hire him because he volunteers at local things. He's involved with this. He has the thought leadership. He does the stuff, right? So like that could be one of the benefits, but that also takes time. That doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, but again, if you've developed a network and you're not leveraging it, you're not spending time with them, you're not helping them, you're not feeding, like I'm feeding my clients tons and tons of referrals. I'm inviting them to come to networking things. Like I'm not just coaching and training, I'm making sure that the relationship is so strong. It's real. It's not fake. This is all like, I just love helping people. And I love, putting two lawyers together. I just connected Kerbis with a friend of mine that's not even a lawyer because I just think that they would hit it off. So it's continually thinking about others. That, by the way, might be part of your differentiator. Is this is someone who just cares and goes out of their way for everyone else. And I want to send them my estate plan, or I want to do business with them.
Yeah, that cannot, like, just in case you missed that, click the rewind 30 seconds button and go back, because that might be the most important takeaway there. And you'd think, well, no, of course, everybody's doing that. But I don't think so. I think a lot of people are looking out for themselves, and they're not actually genuinely trying to build relationships and do good for others for the sake of doing good for others. And I know, like, you can't measure karma, but you'd be amazed at how karma comes back.
You can't measure it, but you can track what you're providing out there for people, and you can track what they're bringing back to you. It doesn't need to be, publicly announced. I think it's something that you could be doing privately, either on your head or on paper. Like, how many people are like, I'm in a networking group that I run in the North Shore of Chicago where we do thankmonials and testimonials. And when someone gives, and their name, they're the one that people keep thanking in the room. Well, guess what? They're the ones who are going to get all the business because they're clearly the giver, and they also happen to be amazing at what they do. So if you're great at what you do and you're a great giver, that's going to bode well for you in developing your book of business.
Absolutely. And just as we start to wrap up here, I'll give my example of how to find your differentiation factor. And that is, maybe 10 to 15 years ago, maybe even longer ago, legal marketer experts found that lawyers should really niche down in their practice, riches in the niches, right? And so a lot of lawyers, I'd say the majority of lawyers, then started to very heavily focus on, like, I'm just going to do toxic torts. I'm just going to do trademarks, not even other IP, right? I'm just going to do like one type of area of law. Like they listen to everything you said today, Fretzin, and then they're going to focus on that client avatar and nobody else. So the whole industry was zigging. And when I was planning out my law firm, I decided to zag. I saw market opportunity with being the general practitioner that's affordable, that people don't have access to anymore. And speaking of affordability, in a profession like the legal industry, where most lawyers can't afford to hire themselves if they really needed to, that just comes down to pricing certainty. One of the differentiation factors that I have is pricing certainty. But my clients will know exactly what's going to cost them. And sometimes there's a time horizon. Is this going to take 2 or 3 months? Well, with a subscription and subscription add-ons, they get that pricing certainty. So there are 2 things that I do to differentiate myself from the market: is pricing certainty, and when the industry zigs, I zag. It's not always going to work, and there are risks involved with that. But that's just another example for the person who asked the question. Thank you for that question. So as we start to round out, Fretzin, any last words of wisdom? Where can people find you and all that jazz?
Yeah, just consider what you heard here today. Again, there's a lot of things we can put off till tomorrow, and then it gets put off again and again and again. And I've got lawyers coming to me in their late 50s and 60s that say the same thing every time. I wish I had started networking and doing business development, 20 years ago. And they're just like in the last, chapter of their book, and they've got to hustle now at an older age. So the sooner you get started, the better. People that want to reach me, you can travel and visit my website at fretzin.com. And check me out on LinkedIn, Steve Fretzin, and all my books are on Amazon, and the podcast, Be That Lawyer, on all major platforms. So very easy to find me and very easy to reach out to me if you have an interest in growing your book and you just want to have, I do have an interesting little platform. It's Be That Lawyer Challenge, Kerbis. So if somebody wants to see if I'm the real deal, they can meet with me for 30 minutes. I'll evaluate where the money is, what they might be missing. And if I'm not able to find where the growth potential is or where the real money is in 30 minutes, I'll pay their hourly bill for the half hour. So I'm really willing to put my money where my mouth is. 16 years working exclusively with lawyers. I know what I'm doing, and I'm happy to advise.
That's great, Fretzin. Thanks for giving that to my audience. Everyone who's watching this later on LinkedIn, please like it, comment, share this, repost this, so more attorneys and just really, so what we said today was focused on the legal profession, but so many nuggets of wisdom that could be extrapolated, I think, to anybody who's looking to build a book. So with that, stick around for minute, and we'll just say thanks and goodbye. So thank everyone. And that's our show. Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for being sponsors. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with somebody you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn, since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email Kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.